Hello, I'm Gordon Lane, editor of CameraLabs.com. I'd like to give you a brief video tour around the Olympus Zuiko Digital 25mm pancake lens. Here it is, the 25mm. This lens is designed for use on DSLR bodies that conform to the 4/3 standard. That includes models by Olympus, Panasonic and Leica. I've got it mounted on the Olympus E420 here. Now the 4/3 standard applies a field reduction factor of 2 times, so this 25mm focal length will deliver coverage that's equivalent to 50mm in practice. And in photographic terms, that is standard coverage. It's pretty much what you get with a kit zoom that's halfway through its range, and also the same focal length that most 35mm film SLR owners used in the past. Beyond a fixed focal length, there's 2 other key differences between this lens and a typical kit zoom. First of all, its focal ratio is brighter. At f2.8 it will gather more light than most kit zooms. That makes it useful in lower light situations. It also allows it to achieve a smaller depth of field, which is handy when you're trying to blur the background on portraits. But the biggest difference between this lens and most kit zooms is its physical size. Now so far I've only shown this lens from the front, but just let me turn it to the side and you'll see what I mean. This lens is seriously thin. That's why Olympus can call it a pancake model. It's only 23.5mm thick. That's about 1/3 of the length of the 14 to 42mm Olympus kit lens, and most people would consider that quite a small lens. It's also about half the weight at 95 grams, and when you've got it mounted on an Olympus body, one of the smaller ones like the E420 here, then you've got yourself a seriously small DSLR combination, one that will fit into almost any bag and even squeeze into larger coat pockets. It's actually a serious alternative to larger enthusiast compact cameras. Now because this lens is so small, there's not a great deal to actually show you on it, although it does have a remarkably respectable focusing ring here. This allows you to manually focus the lens, although like most Olympus lenses, it's motor assisted. Now let's take a closer look at this lens's autofocus performance, again on the E420 body. So that's how this lens looks and sounds when it's focusing from infinity to its closest focusing distance and back again. Now obviously it's neither the quickest nor quietest lens on the market, but that's a fairly acceptable compromise considering its size, weight and price. Now before moving on, I just want to show you one other thing about this lens, and that's its cap. You might think, why is he showing you the cap? Well, it's not a plastic clip-on model like most lenses. Instead, it's a metallic screw-on model. Now, this is actually normal for other pancake lenses because of their size. If it was a clip-on model, it would need more to hold on to, and that would make the lens bigger. So obviously because it screws on, it takes you a couple of seconds to attach it and take it off again, so it's not going to be ready for action as quickly as some other lenses, but you do get used to it. It does give it quite a classy look as well as being quite tough. Now of course the big question with a fixed focal length lens like this is whether it's acceptable for day-to-day use in terms of composition compared to a zoom lens. Is it as flexible? Well, let me show you some example shots to show you what you can achieve with this lens in practice so you can decide for yourself. I'll start with coverage in our standard landscape shot. This was taken with the 25mm, offering an equivalent focal length of 50mm. Now to put this into perspective, I'll now show you what you can get from exactly the same spot with a typical kit zoom. Okay, now this shot was taken with a 14 to 45mm kit zoom, zoomed all the way out to an equivalent of 28mm, and you can see it's capturing a much wider field of view. Let's go back to that 25mm shot and you can see it's much tighter. Now let's take a look at what the kit zoom does when it's zoomed in. Here it is zoomed all the way into 45mm, offering an equivalent coverage to 90mm. And now let's go back to the 25. So as you can see, the 25 obviously doesn't get as wide or as close. In fact, as you'd expect with a 25mm focal length, it's roughly in the middle of that kit zoom range. So I'm going to show you all 3 images again in sequence. Here's the 14 to 45 zoomed out. Here's the 25mm. And now here's the 14 to 45mm zoomed in. So looking at those coverage examples, you might imagine that a 25mm fixed lens doesn't have anywhere near the flexibility of a typical kit zoom. But it really depends how you use it. If you actually stand a little bit further away or closer to your subject, it's surprising what you can manage to take with a 25mm. Here's some examples in practice. This landscape shot was taken with the 25mm, and to fit it all in we simply stood a little bit further back and crouched down. And in fact, by forcing you to move around the shot, you normally end up with a much more creative result. The 25mm pancake may not be able to zoom in as close as a typical kit zoom, but it's still appropriate for taking portrait shots like this one. Just simply get a bit closer to your subject, and one of the benefits this lens has over a kit zoom is its brighter focal ratio. This picture was taken at f2.8, and as you can see, it's allowed us to very effectively blur that background. A brighter focal ratio is also invaluable when it comes to taking pictures indoors under darker conditions, like this shot taken inside a bar for instance. Now here we've got the sensitivity of the camera increased to 800 ISO, and the aperture is wide open at f2.8, allowing a shutter speed of a 30th of a second. Now that's a fairly fast shutter speed for this kind of environment, and it's allowed us to eliminate any chance of camera shake. Had this shot been taken with a typical kit lens though, the focal ratio would have been slower. That would have meant less light would have got into the camera, and you'd have had to have used a slower shutter speed as a result, which in turn could have resulted in camera shake. So once again, that f2.8 aperture gives you greater flexibility when you're shooting in dimmer conditions. At some point, almost every DSLR owner considers getting a standard prime lens. Partly because it's one of the most affordable, fast optics that you'll be able to buy, and that in turn allows you to better work in low light and achieve the nicer out of focus background on portraits, but also because it teaches you more about photography. Rather than just standing on the spot and zooming in and out, a fixed focal length lens forces you to explore the composition more and often end up with a much better looking effect. Now if you're after a standard prime lens for a 4/3 body, then you'd be looking at one with a 25mm focal length, and that in turn will lead you to models like this pancake. However, this lens of course has one other great benefit, and that's its physical size. When you've got it mounted on a body like an E400 series camera, then you've got yourself a seriously small DSLR kit. And certainly E400 series owners who already value portability and compact size will really love this lens. It's also an ideal choice if you've got an E500 series camera too. Of course, the big question is how this performs optically. Is there a compromise with a lens this small? Well, to find out, head on over to our full review at cameralabs.com, where we've compared it against models like the Olympus 12 to 60mm zoom, and also the Olympus 50mm macro. That's another quality prime lens. So to find out if this is an ideal general purpose lens for you, head on over to cameralabs.com. There you'll find our full review.